Hello students, this video is a brief introduction to translation. Translation focuses more on practice than theoretical approach. The word translate is formed from the Latin trans and latus, which means carried across. So translation is a transfer process which aims at the transformation of a written source language text into an optimally equivalent target language text and which requires the syntactic, the semantic and the pragmatic understanding and analytical processing of the source language. 20th century is considered as the age of translation by Jumplet. In all texts discussing translation, SL refers to source language and TL is target language. The formula of SL being transferred to TL refers to transferring similar meaning and transferring a similar structure precisely without distorting TL structure. So, what happens in the process of translation? Is it faithful, imitative, or creative? Dr R Saktheswari calls translation an art. Eric Jacobson addresses it as a craft. Horst Friends is of the opinion that translation is neither a creative art nor an imitative art, but stands somewhere between the two. Lefevre defines the goal of translation studies is to produce a comprehensive theory which can also be used as a guide for the production of translation. Thus, the process of translation takes the way of what a good translator perceives it to be. Of the theorists in the field of translation studies, Susan Bassnett is one of the most acclaimed. Her contribution in this field is remarkable. She was born in the year 1945. She is a theorist of translation and a scholar of comparative literature. She served as Pro Vice Chancellor at the University of Warwick for 10 years and as a professor of comparative literature at the Universities of Glasgow and Warwick. In 2007, she was elected as a Fellow in Royal Society of Literature. Translation studies and comparative literature are the outcome of her extensive research in these fields. Exchanging Lives is a collection of poems written by her. These are some of the books written by Susan Bassnett. Translation Studies is a book written by Susan Bassnett. In the book, she describes in detail the theory and practice of translation. Based on the chapters of the book, 3 broad sections can be identified. Section 1 deals with language and culture, types of translation, and problems in translating. Section 2 gives an overview of the development of translation through ages. Section 3 analyzes the specific problems of literary translation with reference to translating poetry, prose, and dramatic texts. Language and culture play a vital role in the process of translation. Edward Sapir says, language is a guide to social reality. Lotman says that no language can exist unless it is steeped in the context of culture, and no culture can exist which does not have at its center the structure of a natural language. So, here we come to know about the strong bonding between language and a culture. According to Lotman, language is the primary modeling system. Literature and art are the secondary modeling system. The types of translation are mentioned here under intralingual translation or rewording. This is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs in the same language. Second category is interlingual translation or translation proper. This refers to the interpretation of verbal signs by means of some other language. Intersemiotic translation or transmutation is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of signs of non-verbal sign systems. Of these three types, translation proper describes the process of transfer from SL to TL. Now, Jacobson goes on immediately to point to the central problem in all types, that while messages may serve as adequate interpretations of code units or messages, there is ordinarily no full equivalence through translation. Even a parent synonym does not yield equivalence, and Jacobson shows how intralingual translation often has to resort to a combination of code units in order to fully interpret the meaning of a single unit. Hence, a dictionary of so-called synonyms may give perfect as a synonym for ideal or vehicle as a synonym for conveyance, but in neither case can they be said to be complete equivalence, since each unit contains within itself a set of non-transferable associations and connotations. If this is the case with intralingual, we could imagine how hard it would be interlingual translation that deals with two different languages. So, in the process of translation, there are problems with regard to linguistic features, cultural aspects, and equivalence. Surpassing all these difficulties stands a good translation that renders the SL into TL in an appropriate way, keeping intact the invariant core of the text. So, to conclude, translation does not only involve the transfer of meaning contained in one set of language signs into another set of language signs, but also a whole set of extra linguistic criteria. Thank you.